If you don't want to sweep the floors, then get out of my house. In the freezing snow, I helped a man change a flat tire. He looked at me and said, "You have a kind heart." When he pulled down his hood, I recognized him instantly. He was my high school first love, and now he was a billionaire. He opened his car door and said something that made me freeze completely. "I'm so glad you're here. Please stay with my story until the very end, and leave the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far my story travels." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks, hurting far worse than the December wind piercing through my thin coat. If you're not going to get down on your knees and scrub these floors like I asked, then get out. We don't need a lazy old lady taking up space here. I stood in the hallway of the place I had called home for the past 3 years, staring at my daughter-in-law, Indigo. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the doorframe, waiting for my answer. Behind her I could see my son, Everett, sitting in his leather recliner. His eyes were glued to the TV screen, acting as if the conversation happening just 10 feet away didn't even exist. "Indigo, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the evening news playing in the background. "It's snowing outside. Where am I supposed to go at this hour?" She just shrugged, her blonde hair catching the light of the chandelier. The expensive one she insisted on installing last year, even though I knew they couldn't afford it. "That's not my problem, Phyllis. You've lived here rent-free for 3 years, eating our food and using our electricity. The least you could do is clean up your own mess. Rent-free." That word stung because it was a complete lie. Every single month I gave them $800 out of my $1,200 pension to help pay the bills. That left me with just $400 for everything else. My medication, my basic necessities, and the occasional coffee with my old neighbor Sarah, whenever she could drive over to visit. "Everett!" I called out, hoping my son would finally speak up, hoping he would stand up for his mother, the way I had protected him countless times during his 38 years of life. "Son, please tell her I can't go out in this weather." He didn't even turn around. Instead, he grabbed the remote and turned up the volume until the sound of a crime drama filled the room. His message was loud and clear. He chose his wife's comfort over his mother's basic safety. I looked down at my feet. I was still wearing the thin slippers I had on when I woke up this morning in the converted storage room they called my bedroom. It was a windowless space, barely big enough for a twin bed and a small dresser they bought at a garage sale. This was what my life had come to at 65. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I actually felt. "I'll pack my things." "Don't take too long," Indigo called out behind me as I walked away. "We have company coming later and I don't want any drama." Company. It was probably her sister Melody and that brother-in-law who loved making jokes about nursing homes whenever I was within earshot. They would surely laugh about this tomorrow, joking about how they finally got rid of the dead weight. I dragged my old suitcase out from under the bed and began folding the few clothes I owned. 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of pants, some undergarments, and the wool coat my late husband Robert bought me for our anniversary 20 years ago. Everything I owned in this world could fit into this single small suitcase. As I packed, memories rushed back. I remembered Everett as a colicky baby, so difficult to soothe, while Robert worked double shifts at the factory. I remembered the years after Robert passed away, when Everett was only 16, and I worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads and send him to college. I remembered the pride in his eyes at graduation, and the promises he made to take care of me when I grew old. Today, those promises felt like absolute lies. 20 minutes later, I rolled my suitcase through the living room. Indigo was curled up on the couch right next to my son, both of them watching a reality show about wealthy housewives. Neither of them looked up as I walked toward the front door. "Bye, Mom," Everett called out casually, as if I were just going to the grocery store instead of being abandoned in a December blizzard. The moment I stepped outside, the freezing cold hit me hard. The snow was falling heavily, already covering the footprints I had left when I went to get the mail this morning. The wind howled through the bare trees lining the suburban street, and through the whiteout, I could barely see the houses across the road. I pulled my coat tight and started walking, the suitcase wheels struggling through the accumulating snow on the sidewalk. With every step, freezing water seeped into my thin slippers. Within minutes, my toes lost all feeling. The streetlights only illuminated small circles of snow, and beyond that, there was only endless darkness and the howling wind. Where could I go? Sarah lived 15 miles away, and even if I could reach her, I knew her apartment building had a strict policy against overnight guests. The downtown homeless shelter would surely be full on a night like this, and I didn't even have enough money for a cab ride. I kept walking, more out of survival instinct than any actual plan. The suitcase seemed to get heavier with every step, and I had to stop twice just to catch my breath. My breath turned into small clouds of white mist, immediately carried away by the freezing wind. That's when I saw a stranded car pulled over by the side of the road. In the middle of the blizzard, its hazard lights blinked like a steady heartbeat. A figure in a dark, heavy coat was kneeling by the front tire, struggling with a car jack in the biting wind. I should have kept walking. Any rational person would have. I was a 65-year-old woman with nowhere to go, dragging a suitcase through a storm. But something made me stop. "Excuse me," I called out, raising my voice over the wind. "Do you need some help?" The person looked up, and I could see it was a man, probably in his late 60s with silver hair showing beneath his hood. His coat looked incredibly expensive, and even in the dim light I could tell his clothes were worth more than everything I owned combined. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be out in this weather," he said, standing up and brushing the snow off his knees. "Did your car break down too?" I almost laughed at the assumption that I had a car. "No, I was just passing by and saw you needed a hand. I know how to change a tire." It was true. Robert had insisted years ago that a woman needed to know how to take care of herself, so he taught me. It was one of the few useful skills I had kept as the years caught up with me. The man stared at me for a long moment, taking in my soaked slippers, my thin coat, and the suitcase I was dragging behind me. "Ma'am, forgive me for saying so, but you look like the one who needs help right now." "I'm fine," I lied, though my teeth were already chattering. "Really, let me show you how to loosen those lug nuts in this freezing cold." For the next 20 minutes, we worked together in the swirling snow. I showed him how to properly place the jack on the icy ground and how to use his body weight on the lug wrench. My hands were so cold I could barely grip the metal, but I kept going. I was actually grateful for something to focus on, something to temporarily distract me from my own desperate situation. "There," I finally said as we tightened the last nut on the spare tire. "That should get you safely to wherever you're going." He stood up and wiped his hands on a cloth from the trunk. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without your help." He paused, looking closer at me under the car's interior light. "You have a kind heart, stopping to help a stranger when you're clearly in a tough spot yourself." Something in his voice made me look up, really studying his face for the first time. Even with the passage of time, the wrinkles around his eyes and the silver in his hair, I recognized that voice. I recognized those eyes. "Michael," the word escaped my lips as a whisper. He froze instantly, then slowly raised his hand to pull down his hood, revealing a face I had fallen in love with 48 years ago in the hallways of Jefferson High School. Michael Chen, the boy who promised he would write to me when his family moved to California the summer before our senior year. The boy whose letters stopped coming just 3 months later, breaking my 16-year-old heart. "Phyllis Elizabeth Morrison," he said softly. The way he spoke my full name instantly transported me back to 1975, back to when we used to meet by our lockers between classes, dreaming of a future together. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still unable to believe it was really him. "I was about to ask you the same thing." His gaze moved from my face to my suitcase, then down to my soaked slippers. I watched as a look of sudden realization washed over his expression. "Phyllis, what on earth happened to you?" Before I could answer, he walked to his car and opened the passenger door. "Get in, please. We need to get you warm and dry before you catch pneumonia." I hesitated. This was Michael Chen, my first love. But he was also a stranger now. 48 years had passed. He could be anyone, have any motive. "Phyllis," he called out, his voice holding a strength that made me look at him again. "I know this is strange, but I promise you're safe with me. Whatever put you out on the street tonight, whatever happened, let me help you. Please." Maybe it was the cold making me lightheaded. Maybe it was the shock of seeing him after all these years. Or maybe it was just because I truly had nowhere else to go. I found myself nodding, putting my suitcase in his trunk, and sliding into the warm leather seat of a car I only now realized was incredibly expensive. As Michael started the engine and cranked the heater to the maximum, I closed my eyes, trying to process everything. In the span of just 2 hours, I had been thrown out by my own family and rescued by the boy I loved half a century ago. "Where can I take you?" Michael asked gently as he pulled away from the curb. I opened my eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive coat, the luxury car, the confidence he carried even in a crisis. This was no longer the shy teenager I used to know. This was a man who had clearly done very well for himself in the decades since we lost touch. "I don't know," I admitted, the words catching in my throat. "I really don't know." He was quiet for a moment, then reached over and gently took my hand. His fingers were warm and steady, a stark contrast to my own trembling ones. "It's okay," he said. "We'll figure it out together." As we drove through the snow-covered streets, the heat finally began to melt the numbness in my feet. I wondered if this was all some kind of dream. After years of feeling invisible, discarded and forgotten, someone from my past had appeared, treating me like I still mattered. I didn't know what kind of man Michael Chen had become in the 48 years since we last spoke, but whatever else had changed, one thing remained the same. He still made me feel like I was worth saving. Michael took me to the Marriott downtown, the one with the marble lobby and crystal chandeliers. I had only ever seen it from the outside before, usually from the window of the city bus on my way to the nearby medical clinic. The front desk clerk didn't even blink when Michael asked for their best available suite. She just handed over the key cards with the practiced smile of someone used to dealing with high-net-worth clients. "Welcome back, Mr. Chen," she said warmly. "Will you be staying with us long this time?" "I'm not sure yet," he replied, his hand resting lightly on my back as he guided me toward the elevators. "We'll let you know." The suite was larger than the entire house I had been sharing with Everett. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights, which were now blurred by the relentless snow. The warm glow of a gas fireplace reflected off leather furniture that probably cost more than a year of my income back when I was still working. "Sit," Michael said, pointing to the sofa closest to the fire. "I'll get us something warm to drink." I sat on the very edge of the cushion, terrified my damp clothes would ruin such expensive furniture, unable to truly relax. Michael walked over to the kitchenette, and I heard the familiar sound of a kettle being prepared for tea. It reminded me of Sunday afternoons at my grandmother's house when I was a child. She used to fuss over guests just like that, making sure they felt entirely welcome. He handed me a steaming mug and sat in the chair opposite me, his eyes never leaving my face. "Now, tell me what happened tonight, and don't say nothing. I know you too well to let you brush this off." Even after all these years, the warmth of the tea seemed to unlock something inside me. Maybe it was the shock of the night, or maybe it was just seeing Michael again. But suddenly, the words started pouring out. I told him everything. About Robert passing away 8 years ago, about the struggle to survive on a midget pension, and how I thought it was a lifeline when Everett invited me to move in with them. "I thought it would be good for all of us," I said, staring into my mug. "I could help with the cooking, the cleaning, maybe with kids if they ever had them. I didn't realize I was moving in to be their live-in servant." Michael's jaw tightened. "They charged you rent? $800 a month, almost my entire pension." The words tasted bitter. Indigo said it was only fair since I was using their utilities and eating their food, but I was the one doing most of the cooking, most of the cleaning. I think she just liked having someone to order around. "And your son just let this happen?" I was quiet for a long time, remembering the countless times I had hoped Everett would speak up for me, hoped he would remember who I was before I became this diminished version of myself. Everett learned a long time ago that it's easier to keep Indigo happy than to make waves. She has very specific ideas about how things should be, and she doesn't tolerate opposition. What triggered tonight's situation? I almost laughed at how politely he phrased it. She wanted me to get down on my knees and scrub the bathroom floor, said a mop wasn't thorough enough. When I suggested that, at my age, maybe I didn't need to be crawling around on the tile to get a floor clean, she decided I was being defiant. Michael set his coffee mug down with enough force to make me look up. His face was calm, but his eyes held a fury I had never seen in him before. "She put a 65-year-old woman out into a blizzard because you wouldn't crawl on the floor to scrub tiles." When you say it like that, it sounds even worse. It sounds exactly like what it is. It's elder mistreatment. He stood up and began pacing in front of the window, his expensive suit moving with the easy command he seemed to exude. "Phyllis, you can't go back there. I don't have anywhere else to go." The harsh reality hung between us like a physical object. "My pension barely covers the essentials. I can't afford an apartment on my own, not even a studio. I looked into senior housing, but the waiting lists are years long." Michael stopped pacing and turned to face me. In the soft light from the fireplace, I could see the boy I used to love overlapping with the successful man he had become. The same dark eyes, the same way he tilted his head when he was thinking. "What really happened to us, Phyllis?" he asked softly. "After I moved to California, I wrote to you every single week for months. You never replied." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "What letters, Michael? I never received a single letter from you." He went completely rigid. "That's impossible. I sent them to your home address, the same house I'd been to dozens of times." "I waited," I whispered, the old pain rushing back, fresh and sharp. "I waited for months. I thought you forgot about me, found someone else in California. I figured you were done with small-town girls who weren't sophisticated enough for your new life." Michael sank back into his chair, his face pale. "My mother," he said finally. "She never liked you. Always thought you weren't good enough for me. She must have intercepted the letters before they ever got to you." The silence stretched between us as we both processed what his mother had stolen from us. 48 years of assumptions, 48 years of believing I had been abandoned or forgotten, when the truth was simply that someone else had made the choice to tear us apart. "I looked for you," he said after a moment. "Not right away. I was young, hurt, and angry because it seemed like you had completely cut me off. But later, when I was older and more successful, I hired investigators. They told me you had married Robert Morrison, moved away, said you looked happy and settled. I didn't want to ruin that." "Robert was a good man," I said carefully. "We had a good marriage. But Michael, I never stopped wondering what would have happened if you had written, if I had known you still cared." "And now here we are," he said softly. "Both of us alone. Both of us carrying regrets we didn't even know we were supposed to have." I studied his face in the firelight, seeing the lines that spoke of years of hard work and success, but also a deep loneliness. "Tell me about your life. What happened after California? Did you marry? Have children?" Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "After I lost you, I buried myself in work. I started a software company in Silicon Valley right when personal computers were taking off in the early 80s. We went public in '92, and I've been expanding into different tech sectors ever since." "It sounds incredibly successful." "It was. I'm worth about $250 million now." He said it casually, without pride or boasting. "I've been married twice. My first wife left me after 5 years for her tennis instructor, said I was married to the job, that I cared more about computers than her. She wasn't entirely wrong. The second wife lasted 8 years before she decided she liked the lifestyle my money provided a lot more than she liked actually living with me." "No children?" "No. Sarah, my first wife, had a son from a previous marriage. I tried to be a father figure, but when she left, she made sure I never saw him again. Carla never wanted kids, said they interfered with her travel, her social calendar." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What about you, besides Everett?" "Just Everett. I had 2 miscarriages after him. Then the doctors said it wasn't likely I'd ever carry to term again. Robert and I talked about adoption, but—" My voice trailed off, not wanting to say that we never had the kind of money required for the process. Every spare dollar went toward Everett's needs and expenses. "You poured everything into raising him." "Everything." I thought of the jobs I'd worked, cleaning offices at night, working retail on weekends, doing whatever it took to make sure Everett had what he needed. Everett was a sophomore in college when Robert died. I kept working, kept paying his tuition and living expenses. I wanted him to graduate, wanted him to have the opportunities I never had. "And how does he repay you for those sacrifices?" I was quiet for a long time, staring into the fireplace. Finally, I looked up at Michael. He married a woman who saw me as a competitor for his attention and resources. And then, when it came down to her comfort or my basic safety, he chose her. Michael's expression turned cold again. "He doesn't deserve you." "He's my son." "That doesn't give him the right to treat you like a burden." Michael stood up from his chair and sat next to me on the sofa, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive, but not overwhelming. Different from the drugstore aftershave Robert used to wear. "Phyllis, I want to ask you something, and I need you to think about it before you answer." I nodded, suddenly nervous about what he might say. "What if you never had to worry about money again? What if you could live wherever you wanted, do whatever you wanted without ever being dependent on people who don't appreciate you?" "That's not realistic, Michael. I'm 65. I don't have skills people pay for anymore. I don't have savings, investments, or... I'm not talking about a job, he interrupted gently. I'm talking about me taking care of you. I'm talking about you letting me give you the life you should have had all along. I stared at him, convinced I must be misunderstanding. What are you saying? I'm saying I never stopped loving you, Phyllis Elizabeth Morrison. Not for the last 48 years. I'm saying that if you'll let me, I want to spend whatever time we have left making up for all the years we lost. The words hung in the air between us, impossible, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a white silence. In this warm, luxurious suite, the boy I used to love was offering me a future I had never dared to dream of. But there was my family, the son who had cast me out but might still need me. And there was the question of whether two people, after 48 years of separate lives, could bridge the gap and find love again. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Michael reached over and took my hand, just like he had in the car last night, his fingers wrapping around mine with a warm, steady pressure. Promise me you'll think about it. Promise me you won't go back to people who don't value you just because you think you have no other choice. I looked around the beautiful room, at the man who had appeared like a miracle on the worst night of my life. Tomorrow I would have to make decisions about my future, about what comes next. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt safe. I'll think about it, I promised, and watched as something that looked like hope flared in his deep eyes. The next morning, I woke up in a bed so comfortable I thought I was still dreaming. Egyptian cotton sheets, a down comforter that felt like a cloud, and sunlight streaming through the windows, overlooking the city I had lived in for 40 years but had never seen from this high up. For a second, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The fight with Indigo, the blizzard, Michael's face in the storm. I sat up slowly, my joints protesting less than they usually did after a night on the narrow mattress back at Everett's house. Michael had insisted I take the master bedroom despite my protests, taking the sofa for himself. "A gentleman doesn't let a lady sleep on the couch," he had said with that smile that reminded me of the boy I used to know, the one that actually made my heart skip a beat. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Phyllis, are you awake? I ordered room service." I wrapped the hotel robe around myself, the thick terry cloth kind that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and opened the door. Michael stood there holding a silver coffee carafe, still in yesterday's shirt, but looking remarkably refreshed in that way only expensive skincare and good genetics can manage. "Good morning," he said, his voice holding a hint of something almost shy. "I wasn't sure how you took your coffee, so I ordered a bit of everything." The sitting area had been transformed into a breakfast nook. Fresh orange juice, pastries that looked like they came from a French bakery. Eggs, Benedict, fresh fruit arranged like artwork. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen that much food that didn't have a grocery store markdown sticker on it. "This is too much," I protested, but Michael was already pulling out a chair for me. "I haven't had breakfast with you in 48 years, he said. "Let me spoil you a little." As we ate, Michael talked about his business, his travels, the house he built in Napa Valley that he rarely had time to visit. I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in years, laughing at his stories of difficult clients and tech disasters. This was the Michael I remembered. Funny, kind, interested in every word I said. "What about you?" he asked as I finished the best croissant I'd ever tasted in my life. "Before you retired, what did you do besides raise Everett? I felt a familiar flash of embarrassment. "Nothing very exciting, I'm afraid. After Robert died, I worked at a dry cleaner for 23 years. Before that, it was a bit of everything. Cleaning offices, retail, waitressing a few times. Just survival work, really." "Don't do that," Michael said firmly. "Don't diminish yourself. You kept a household together, raised a son, survived the loss of your husband, and adapted to whatever work you could find to keep going. That takes immense strength and resourcefulness." The ringing of an old flip phone saved me from having to respond. The caller ID showed Everett's number, and my stomach immediately clenched with anxiety. Old habits die hard. Even after being thrown out into a blizzard, my first instinct was still to worry about my son. "I probably should take this," I said apologetically. Michael nodded. "Of course, I'll be right here." I answered on the fourth ring. "Hello, Everett." "Mom, where on earth are you?" His voice was tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Indigo has been calling around all morning looking for you. She's frantic. After throwing me into a blizzard. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so painful. "I'm fine," I said simply. "I found a warm, safe place to stay." "Where? With that Sarah woman?" "Because I called her place and she said she hadn't heard from you." I glanced at Michael, who was pretending to look at a newspaper but was clearly hanging on every word. "I'm with an old friend." "What old friend?" "Mom, you don't have wealthy friends. I can tell you're somewhere nice. I can hear the background noise. What's going on?" There was something in Everett's voice I hadn't heard before. It wasn't concern for my safety. It sounded almost like panic, as if the fact that I was somewhere nice was a threat to him. "It doesn't matter where I am," I said. "I'm safe, I'm warm, and I'm being treated with the respect I deserve. Something I haven't experienced in your house for a very long time." "Mom, don't be dramatic. Indigo was just having a bad day yesterday. You know how stressed she gets. Just come home and we'll work this out." "Work what out exactly?" I countered. "The fact that I pay $800 a month to be treated like a servant? Or the fact that your wife thinks asking me to crawl on my knees to scrub a floor is a reasonable request? Or maybe the fact that you sat there and watched her throw your mother into a blizzard without saying a single word?" Silence on the other end. "She said you can come back if you apologize." The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything that happened, after nearly freezing on the street because of their cruelty, they wanted me to apologize. "Goodbye, Everett," I said quietly and hung up before he could reply. Michael looked up from his paper. "Everything all right?" "They want me to apologize," I said, still staring at my phone, "for refusing to be mistreated." Before I could say anything else, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Phyllis Morrison?" The voice was a young woman's, tight with an edge of near panic. "Who is this?" "It's Indigo. I'm calling from my sister's phone because you won't answer mine." I wanted to hang up immediately, but something in her tone stopped me. The cold authority from yesterday was gone. In its place, she sounded frantic, a desperate edge I had never heard from her before. "What do you want, Indigo?" "I want to know where you are and who you're with." Her voice was trembling. "Everett said you're staying at some expensive place with a wealthy friend. I need to know who it is." "Why?" "Because..." She paused, and I could hear her breathing heavily. "Because I know everyone in your social circle, Phyllis. You don't have wealthy friends. So either you're lying or something else is going on." Michael was watching me now, his expression full of concern. I put the phone on speaker so he could hear. "I don't owe you an explanation," I said. "Yesterday you made it very clear that I wasn't welcome in your home, so my whereabouts are no longer your business." "Phyllis, please." Indigo's voice was dropping into open desperation now. "I'm begging you, just tell me who you're with. What's his name?" "His name?" It was interesting that she automatically assumed it was a man, and interesting how panicked she was about it. "Why does that matter?" I asked. "Because..." Another long pause. "What if he's dangerous? What if he's taking advantage of you? I'm worried about you." Michael raised an eyebrow at that, his expression shifting from concern to something colder. "You're worried about me?" I repeated, letting every word sink in. "After throwing me out into a blizzard because I wouldn't scrub your bathroom floor?" "That was a mistake," Indigo said quickly. "I was stressed. I wasn't thinking straight. But this is different. This is about your safety." A sudden thought struck me. "How do you know I'm somewhere expensive, Indigo?" "What?" "You just said Everett told you I was somewhere nice, that he could hear the background noise, but I was just on the phone with him. Unless you were listening on an extension, how would you know anything about the environment being expensive?" Silence. "Then, I just assumed..." "Or unless you've been digging," I continued. "Unless you've been trying to figure out who I could possibly be with and what that might mean for you." Michael leaned forward, suddenly very interested in the conversation. "I don't know what you're implying," Indigo said, but her voice was rising, growing tighter. "I'm not implying anything, I'm asking directly. What are you actually afraid of?" A long pause, and then, in a voice so small I could barely hear it. "What's his name, Phyllis? Please, I just need to know his name." I looked at Michael. He gave a small nod. "His name is Michael Chen," I said clearly. The sound that came through the phone was the sound of the air being sucked out of the room. A dead silence that lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Indigo, are you there?" When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Michael Chen," as in Michael Chen of Chen Technologies. Now it was my turn to be surprised. I looked at Michael with raised eyebrows. "You know who he is?" I asked. "Oh my God," Indigo gasped. "Oh my God, Phyllis, where exactly are you right now? Which hotel? How did you..." "Which hotel, Phyllis, please?" I looked at Michael again, baffled by the sudden turnaround in my daughter-in-law's attitude. He was frowning now, clearly trying to piece together why my daughter-in-law would know exactly who he was. "The Marriott downtown," I said finally. "Don't go anywhere," Indigo said, her voice now filled with a completely different kind of urgency. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm coming down there right now." "Indigo, what's wrong? How do you even know Michael?" "I don't know him personally," she stammered, her words colliding in a frantic rush. "But Everett works for Henderson Construction. They've been trying to land a contract with Chen Technologies for 2 years. It would be the biggest deal in the company's history. Phyllis, do you understand what this means?" A cold knot formed in my stomach as the pieces finally clicked into place. "What does it mean?" "It means you're sitting next to a man who could change our entire lives with a single phone call. It means you have the power now. Real power." She paused, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, what have I done?" The sheer desperation in her voice was unmistakable. All pretenses of control and authority had completely vanished. In an instant, she had gone from treating me like a burden to realizing I was the only key to the life she desperately craved. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. "Please don't do anything until I get there, Phyllis. I'm begging you." The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked at Michael. His expression was completely unreadable. "Henderson Construction," he said calmly. "Your son works for Henderson Construction. You know them?" Michael's smile turned icy, a stark contrast to the warmth he had shown me all morning. "Oh, I know them very well. For months they've been flooding my office with proposals, badgering my assistants, and showing up at my building trying to force a meeting. Highly persistent people." "Everett mentioned a massive contract they were hoping to sign," I said slowly. "He's been working overtime, staying up late, bringing his work home." Indigo couldn't stop talking about how this deal would change their financial future forever. And now, she realizes the woman she threw out into the snow happens to have a history with the man holding that contract. Michael leaned back in his chair. For the first time since we reunited, he looked every bit the powerful tech mogul he had become. How interesting. The sheer irony of the situation began to sink in. For 3 years, I had lived under their roof feeling like a nuisance, someone they barely tolerated out of obligation. Yet all along, a chance encounter with me was the one thing they were desperate to secure. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Michael was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the city below. When he finally looked back at me, his eyes were thoughtful. "That depends," he said. "What do you want me to do?" For the first time in years, someone was asking me what I wanted, rather than dictating what I should accept. Since Robert died, the power dynamics defining my life were shifting, and I wasn't entirely sure how to handle it. 20 minutes later, a frantic knock echoed at the suite door. "That must be them," I said softly. Michael stood up and straightened his shirt. "Ready?" I thought about yesterday. I thought about being forced onto my knees to scrub a floor, the hopeless trek through the freezing snow, and the crushing weight of being disregarded. Then I looked at Michael, at the luxury surrounding us, and the future he was offering me. "Ready," I said, and I meant it from the bottom of my heart. When Michael opened the door, Indigo practically stumbled into the room. She had clearly thrown on the nearest clothes she could find, jeans, a wrinkled sweater, and her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. Behind her stood Everett, looking completely bewildered and out of place. "Mr. Chen," Indigo gasped, immediately extending her hand. "It is such an honor to meet you. I'm Indigo Morrison, and this is my husband, Everett. We are so incredibly grateful to you for helping Phyllis last night." Michael shook her hand politely but didn't smile. "Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Morrison." Everett stepped forward, still struggling to comprehend why his mother was having breakfast with one of the most successful businessmen in the state. "Mom, we need to talk. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand." "Has it?" I asked, remaining seated at the table. "Which part got out of hand? The part where your wife threw me out in a blizzard, or the part where you sat by and let her?" Indigo shot her husband a glare sharp enough to cut glass, then turned back to Michael, turning on the desperate, weaponized charm she used whenever she wanted something. "Mr. Chen, I hope you understand that this is all just a terrible misunderstanding. We love Phyllis dearly, and we've been worried sick about her." "Worried enough to call the police when she went missing?" Michael asked mildly. Another heavy silence filled the room. We knew she was resourceful," Everett offered weakly. Michael nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. "I see." Resourceful enough that you felt comfortable letting a 65-year-old woman wander around in a blizzard rather than apologizing for your wife's behavior and asking her to stay. Wait a minute, Everett said, a bit of his usual defensiveness returning. You don't know the whole story. My mother can be very difficult to deal with sometimes, very set in her ways. Something inside me finally snapped. Difficult? Because I refused to crawl around on the bathroom floor? I didn't mean it like that. Then what did you mean? My voice came out louder than I expected. For the first time in years, I didn't care whose comfort I was disrupting. Please, enlighten us. Let Mr. Chen see the truth. Tell him exactly how difficult I was while paying you $800 a month to live in your utility room and clean your house. Everett's face flushed a deep crimson. Mom, you're embarrassing us. No, Michael said quietly, but with an absolute authority that brooked no argument. I believe you and your wife are embarrassing yourselves. The room fell dead silent, save for the sound of Indigo's sharp breathing. I could almost see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to salvage a situation that was spiraling completely out of her control. Mr. Chen, she finally spoke, her voice deceptively sweet. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. I would hate for a family matter to interfere with business relations. Michael's smile was razor sharp. Business relations, Mrs. Morrison? I wasn't aware we had any. Well, no, not yet, but Henderson Construction has been hoping to— Yes, Michael interrupted. I am well aware of what Henderson Construction has been hoping for. The question is, what makes you think I care about their hopes now? The weight of his words dropped like a heavy blanket over the room. Indigo's face went entirely pale as she realized that her mistreatment of me hadn't just cost her a free housekeeper. It had likely cost them their entire financial future. And I was only just beginning to realize the true power of the position I was in. As Michael's words hung in the air, a deafening silence followed. I watched Indigo's face cycle through a dozen emotions. Confusion, hope, despair, and finally a dawning terror as she realized her cruelty hadn't just burned a bridge with me. It had likely demolished their future. Mr. Chen, she said carefully, as if speaking to a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. I know we got off to a bad start, but surely we can move past this. Family disputes happen, but it shouldn't affect business. Michael walked to the window, clasping his hands behind his back as he looked out over the city. When he spoke, his tone was conversational, almost casual. You know, Mrs. Morrison, I've been in business for over 30 years. I've seen every type of person imaginable. Brilliant, ruthless, desperate, arrogant. But there is one type of person I refuse to do business with under any circumstance. He turned around, his expression making Everett shift uncomfortably. I don't partner with people who bully those who cannot protect themselves. Indigo's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That wasn't abuse. It was just a heated family argument. You threw a 65-year-old woman out of your house in a blizzard. Michael's voice cut through her protest like a blade. Because she wouldn't get on her knees to scrub your floor. You took $800 a month from her pension, gave her a storage closet to sleep in, and treated her like unpaid help. What exactly would you call that? She's blowing it out of proportion. Everett finally found his voice. My mother always likes to play the victim in every situation. The words felt like a slap in the face, but before I could respond, Michael stepped forward. I had never seen a person's demeanor change so completely, so quickly. The gentleman who had held my hand and ordered breakfast was gone. In his place stood a man radiating the sheer, crushing authority that built a multi-million-dollar empire. Mr. Morrison, he said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Something in Michael's tone must have pierced through Everett's arrogance, because he actually took a step back. But he wasn't smart enough to keep his mouth shut. Look, I don't know what kind of sob story my mother told you, but there are two sides to every story. She's lived in our house rent-free for 3 years. $800 a month, I said clearly. I paid $800 every single month. Which barely covered the utilities, Everett. Michael spoke just one word, and it snapped my son's mouth shut instantly. Phyllis! He turned back to the trembling couple. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen closely. Yesterday morning, I finalized the acquisition of Henderson Construction. The color drained from Indigo and Everett's faces simultaneously. What? Indigo whispered. I bought the company, Michael said matter-of-factly. A 73% controlling stake. The previous owners were in over their heads financially. Apparently, they overextended themselves trying to secure contracts they weren't qualified to handle. I thought it would make a nice addition to my portfolio. Everett sank into one of the suite's expensive chairs, his legs seemingly giving out beneath him. You've owned Henderson Construction since 9 o'clock yesterday morning? Yes. Which means, effectively, I am your employer. In fact, I am both of your employers. Michael's smile was icy. Funny how things turn out, isn't it? Indigo let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. We didn't know. We had no idea you knew Phyllis. If we had known... You would have treated her differently? Michael finished for her. You only show basic human decency when you know there might be consequences? I didn't mean it like that. Then what did you mean? I stood up the first time I had risen since they entered the room. Because it sounds exactly like what you meant. You're sorry only because it turns out I know the man who controls your livelihood. Indigo turned to me, tears streaming down her face, the last of her authority completely shattered. Phyllis, please, I made a mistake. I was stressed about money, about Everett working so hard, about everything falling apart if he didn't get this promotion. I took it out on you and it was wrong. You're right, I said calmly. It was wrong. Just like it was wrong when you made me give up my bedroom so you could have a craft room. Just like it was wrong when you told your friends I was your live-in help instead of Everett's mother. Just like it was wrong to make me feel like a burden in my own son's home for 3 years. I can make it up to you, she pleaded desperately. We can give you the master bedroom. We won't charge you rent anymore. We can... You can what? Michael asked. Continue the mistreatment and better accommodations? Everett finally found his voice again. With all due respect, Mr. Chen, nobody asked you to interfere in our family business. Your mother was freezing on the side of the road with early-stage hypothermia. Michael's voice rose for the first time. Because you and your wife threw her out into a blizzard. I'm the one who found her. How exactly is that none of my business? She could have called someone. Who? Michael demanded. Who was she supposed to call? What kind of safety net does a woman have when her own flesh and blood abandons her in a storm? Everett opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, he seemed to be struggling to confront the reality of what they had done. Not just to me, but to themselves. Mr. Chen, Indigo said, her voice shaking, please don't let this affect Everett's job. He works so hard. He's been with Henderson for 8 years. This is between you and me. It has nothing to do with him. Is it? Michael asked. Because from where I'm sitting, Mr. Morrison was right there when you threw his mother into a blizzard. He had every opportunity to object, to protect her, to show an ounce of human decency. Instead, he turned up the volume on the television. As Michael spoke, I watched my son's face, seeing the exact moment he realized the full consequences of his inaction. For 38 years, I had made excuses for Everett. I told myself he was just young, just selfish like all children, just influenced by his wife. But he wasn't a child anymore. He was a grown man who stood by and watched his mother be broken down, choosing his own comfort over her safety. Mom, Everett said, his voice small, a tone I hadn't heard since he was a little boy. I'm sorry, I should have stood up for you. Yes, I said simply. You should have. Can you forgive me? I looked at my son, really looking at him for the first time in years. I saw Robert's nose, my own stubborn jawline, the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. But I also saw the man who let his wife treat me like a servant, the man who sat in silence while I was turned out into a deadly storm, and the man who, just moments ago, accused me of playing the victim. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I can. Everett's face crumpled. What do you want me to do? How do I fix this? Before I could answer, Michael spoke up. You can start by understanding that actions have consequences. Starting Monday morning, both of you are being reassigned to the custodial department. What? Indigo shrieked. You can't do that. Everett is a project manager. He has a college degree. He used to, Michael corrected. He used to have a project manager position. Now his position involves emptying trash cans and mopping floors, effective immediately. This is ridiculous, Everett said, standing up so fast his chair nearly overturned. You can't destroy our lives over a family argument. I'm not destroying anything, Michael said calmly. I'm simply showing you that behavior has consequences, a concept both of you seem to struggle with. We'll sue, Indigo said frantically. This is unlawful termination, workplace retaliation. Retaliation for what? Michael asked. I'm not firing you. I'm merely reassigning you to roles more suited to your character. Since you find it appropriate to demand that an elderly woman get on her knees to scrub floors, surely you won't mind doing it yourselves." The brutal logic hit them both like a physical blow. They had set the rules: manual labor as a punishment, cleaning as a humiliation. Now they were going to have to live by them. "For how long?" Everett asked quietly. "That depends," Michael said, looking at me. "Phyllis, what do you think is fair?" The question caught me off guard. For 3 years, no one had asked my opinion on anything that mattered. Now I was being asked to decide my son's fate. "I think," I said slowly, "it depends entirely on whether they are truly sorry for what they did, or if they're just sorry they got caught." "We're sorry," Indigo said quickly. "We're truly sorry." "Are you?" I asked. "Are you sorry for how you treated me, or are you sorry that treating me badly ended up costing you so much?" Neither of them answered, which was an answer in itself. Michael nodded, as if confirming what he already suspected. "I think 6 months in the custodial department might give you both a healthy appreciation for treating people with dignity, regardless of their circumstances." "6 months?" Everett's voice cracked. "We can't survive on a janitor's salary for 6 months. The mortgage, the car payments, then perhaps you'll understand a bit better how your mother managed to survive on $1,200 a month while giving $800 of it to you," Michael said without an ounce of mercy. I watched them as the full weight of their situation finally settled in. Everett had never known financial insecurity, never faced the kind of struggle I had navigated for years. Indigo had built her entire identity around being married to a successful man, around the status and middle-class security that came with it. "What do you want from us?" Indigo asked, her voice hollow. It was the first time either of them had asked what I wanted, rather than telling me what I should accept. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and pain. "I want to be valued," I said finally. "I want to be treated like a person, not a nuisance. I want the sacrifices I made and the love I gave to be respected. I want you to understand that tossing someone away like trash doesn't make them worthless. It only proves your own cruelty." "Can you teach us how to do that?" Everett asked. For the first time since he arrived, I heard something real in his voice. Not manipulation, not panic, but genuine remorse. I looked at my son, at his wife, at the mess they had made of their lives in a single night of cruelty. Then I looked at Michael, who was watching me with a patient intensity, the exact same way he used to when I was trying to solve a difficult math problem 48 years ago. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but maybe we can find out." Michael took a step closer to me, his hand finding mine with the same gentle certainty as last night in the car. "Whatever you decide, you don't have to face it alone anymore." As I stood there, caught between my past and my future, between the family that failed me and the love that found me again, I realized something important. For the first time in a very long time, I had choices. Real choices, backed by strength. And I intended to use them wisely. 3 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Michael extended our stay at the hotel so I could try to clear my head, to sort through the wreckage of my old life and figure out what I wanted my new one to look like. Every morning I woke up in luxury I had never imagined, and every night I fell asleep wondering if I truly deserved it. Michael's patience was a reminder of why I had fallen in love with him all those years ago. He didn't pressure me to make a decision or try to convince me that choosing him was the obvious answer. Instead, he was simply there, steady and reassuring, watching as I fought against the 40-year habit of prioritizing family, no matter how poorly they treated me. On the 3rd morning, while Michael was downstairs in a business meeting with a client who had flown in from Seattle, I received a phone call that changed everything. "Mom?" Everett's voice sounded different, lighter, more uncertain than I had heard it in years. "Hello, Everett. Can you meet me somewhere? Just you and me. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I need to talk to you. No Indigo, no Michael Chen, just the two of us." I was silent for a long moment, looking out the hotel window at the city. "What makes you think I want to talk to you?" "Because you're my mom," he said simply. "And despite everything I did wrong, despite how badly I messed up, I'm still your son. I have to believe that still means something." An hour later, I was sitting across from Everett in a small diner downtown, the kind of place where the coffee is strong and no one bothers you if you take your time. He looked terrible. His hair was unwashed, his clothes wrinkled, and deep dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and intense anxiety. "You look awful," I said, surprised to find a hint of maternal concern creeping into my voice. He smiled, despite everything, a hollow sound without any real humor. I feel awful. Mom, I've been thinking about what happened. Really thinking about it, and I need you to know something. What's that? I remembered. I remembered being a kid when Dad passed away, and how terrified I was that you would leave too. I remembered how many jobs you worked, how exhausted you were when you came home, and how I used to think that if I could just be good enough, perfect enough, you'd never have to work so hard again. Tears welled up in his eyes. For a split second, I didn't see the 38-year-old man who had betrayed me. I saw the terrified little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. But then I grew up, he continued. And somewhere along the line I started taking all those sacrifices for granted. I started thinking that was just what mothers did, rather than something special you chose to do for me. And when Indigo came along, you found someone who told you that you were the center of the universe, I said softly. And it was much easier to believe her than to remember how much it cost me to build that universe for you. She made me feel important, Everett admitted. Successful, like I deserved to be taken care of instead of taking care of others. Slowly, she convinced me that you were needy, demanding, that you expected too much from us. What did I expect, Everett? What was too much? He was quiet for a long time, stirring sugar into a coffee he hadn't touched. Respect, he said finally. You expected to be treated with respect in your own son's home, and somehow Indigo made that seem unreasonable. I felt a slight loosening somewhere deep in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement. It was the first time Everett was seeing our situation clearly, without the coloring of Indigo's perspective. Why now? I asked. Why can you see it now? Because I've spent the last 3 days mopping floors, he said with a bitter laugh. Every time I'm down on my knees scrubbing something, I think of you. I think of Indigo demanding you do the same thing. I think of sitting there and letting it happen. I imagine what it feels like to be 65 years old and treated like a servant in your own son's home. What does it feel like? I asked. Mopping the floors? Humiliating? Demoralizing? Like I'm being punished for something I can't quite articulate. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot from fatigue and shame. Is that how we made you feel every day? Most days, yes, I said honestly. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. The apology hung between us, raw and real, a stark contrast to his desperate pleading in Michael's hotel suite. This wasn't about getting me to come back or fixing his financial problems. It was a genuine recognition of the damage and pain caused. What about Indigo? I asked. How is she adjusting to her new role? Everett's expression darkened. She isn't. She called in sick the first 2 days, went in yesterday, lasted about 3 hours, and then had what I can only describe as a complete meltdown. Started screaming at the supervisor, demanding to speak to Michael Chen directly, threatening to sue everyone from the janitor to the CEO. Did she speak to Michael? No. Security escorted her out of the building. She's fired, Mom. Completely terminated. And she's... He paused, seeming to struggle with something. She blames you for everything. Says you manipulated the situation, that you planned this whole thing. She's talking about legal action against you, saying you ruined her life on purpose. I felt a cold anger building in my chest. Even now, even after everything, Indigo was incapable of taking responsibility for her own actions. And you? I asked. Do you believe her? No, Everett said firmly. No, I don't. I think you were just trying to survive in our house, and we made it impossible. I think when someone finally treated you with kindness, you responded to it. No manipulation, no plan, just a basic human need for dignity. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing the sheer destruction of what had been broken and the fragile possibility of what might be repaired. What happens now? Everett finally asked. I don't know, I answered truthfully. Michael asked me to move in with him. He wants to take care of me, to give me a life I never imagined, and I'm seriously considering saying yes. You should, Everett said surprisingly. Mom, you absolutely should, even if it means leaving me behind. Especially because it means leaving me behind. He reached across the table and took my hand, his fingers rough from 3 days of physical labor. I need to figure out who I am when Indigo isn't telling me who to be. I need to learn how to be a man who protects the people he loves instead of a man who retreats into silence. I can't do that if you're still there trying to look after me. What about your marriage? What marriage? Everett smiled bitterly. Indigo moved into her sister's house yesterday, said she couldn't stand the sight of me knowing I was the reason her life was ruined. She's demanding a divorce, half the assets, and she'll probably get them. The house will have to be sold. The car is repossessed. I'll likely be living in some studio apartment starting over at 38. I'm sorry, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Don't be. It's what I deserve. It's what we both deserve. He squeezed my hand. But you, Mom, you deserve so much better than what I gave you. If Michael Chen can provide that, then please, don't let guilt over me hold you back. I searched my son's face, looking for any sign of manipulation or hidden motive, but found only exhaustion and sincere remorse. There is one thing I need to know, I said. If Michael hadn't gotten involved, if there hadn't been any consequences to how you treated me, would you still be sorry? Everett was silent for a long time, really considering the question. I want to say yes, he finally said. I want to believe I would have eventually seen how wrong we were, but honestly, I don't know. I probably would have just kept making excuses, kept believing Indigo's version of things. It probably took something this dramatic to snap me out of it. At least you're honest. I'm trying to be. For the first time in years, I'm trying to be completely honest about who I am and what I've done. He paused. The question is, can you forgive me? Not today, not next week, but someday. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to separate the man sitting across from me from the little boy I had raised. He had hurt me deeply, betrayed every sacrifice I made, and chosen comfort over loyalty. But he was also genuinely remorseful, genuinely committed to changing, and willing to face the consequences without trying to shift the blame. I don't know, I said finally, but I'm willing to find out. A look of immense relief washed over Everett's face. That's already more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's all I have to give right now. We talked for another hour about his childhood, about the mistakes we both made, and about the possibility of building a real relationship as mother and son somewhere down the line. When I finally stood up to leave, Everett rose as well, hesitating before pulling me into a hug. I love you, Mom, he whispered into my hair. I know I didn't show it before, but I do. I love you too, I said, feeling the ice around my heart melt just a little. But love isn't enough anymore, Everett. There has to be respect. There has to be consideration. There has to be evidence that you value me as a person, not just as a mother who exists to serve your needs. I understand, and however long it takes, I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I can be the son you deserve. When I returned to the hotel, Michael was waiting for me in the sitting area of the suite. He was reading a book, sipping tea. He looked up as I entered, his eyes searching my face for clues about how the meeting had gone. How was it? He asked gently. Difficult, but necessary, and maybe hopeful. I sat next to him on the sofa, suddenly exhausted from the emotional weight of the day. He really is sorry, Michael. Not just for the consequences, but for the pain he caused. And how do you feel about that? Confused, relieved, still hurt, but maybe not as hopeless as I was. I leaned back into the soft cushions and closed my eyes. He told me I should say yes to you. Said I deserved a better life than what he gave me. Michael set his book down and reached over, his warm hand covering mine with that familiar, reassuring weight. And what do you think, Phyllis? Are you ready to let me give you that life? I opened my eyes and looked at the boy I had loved nearly 50 years ago, who had grown into a man capable of giving me the world, but who cared more about giving me my dignity back. I thought of the long, hard years behind me, the sacrifices made, and the quiet survival that brought me to this exact moment. Yes, I said, a genuine smile finally touching my face. I think I am. So, what do you think? I opened my eyes and looked at Michael. In my darkest moment, he had stepped into my life like a savior, offering a future I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams. I think, I said slowly, that I'm finally done making decisions based on what everyone else wants instead of what I want. Michael set his book down and turned completely toward me. What is it that you want, Phyllis? I want to wake up every morning in a bed that truly belongs to me. I want to enjoy good coffee, read books, and talk to someone who actually values my thoughts and opinions. I want to travel, see things I've never seen, and eat at restaurants I could never afford before. I want to be someone's first choice, not their last resort. And I want to do all of that with you, I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. I want to see who we would have become if those letters had never been hidden. I want to see if two people can fall in love all over again after 48 years apart." Michael's smile completely transformed his face. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," I replied, feeling the heavy burden of my past life completely slip away. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I was really hoping you'd say that." Inside was the most beautiful ring I had ever seen. It wasn't a standard diamond solitaire, it was an antique emerald surrounded by delicate diamonds. It was elegant, unique, and absolutely perfect. "This belonged to my grandmother," Michael said as he slipped it onto my finger. "She wore it for 63 years through everything life threw at them. I want you to wear it for whatever years we have left, whether it's 3 years or 30. I stared at the ring, watching it catch the light, feeling like it truly belonged on my hand. "What about Everett?" I asked. "What about the possibility of fixing things with him?" "What about it?" Michael asked gently. "Phyllis, choosing to build a life with me doesn't mean you can never speak to your son again. It just means you're no longer sacrificing your own happiness for his comfort. If he wants a relationship with you, he needs to earn it on your terms, not his." His words brought me an immense sense of peace. I didn't have to choose between love and family. I could choose love and let my family prove they deserved a place in my life. "So what do we do now?" I asked. "Now," Michael said, "we go home. We start the life we should have started 48 years ago, and we don't waste another single day on regrets." As he kissed me for the first time since we were 17, I realized something profound. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't about seeking revenge or even forcing forgiveness. Sometimes it's simply about choosing yourself, your own happiness, your own worth, and your own future. For the first time in my adult life, that's exactly what I was doing. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of Michael's home in Napa Valley, watching the sunrise paint the vineyards in shades of gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. This kitchen was larger than the entire apartment I used to share with Robert, but somehow it felt incredibly warm and cozy. Michael had made sure to fill it with little pieces of my history to make it feel like our home. My grandmother's old recipe box sat on the counter, photos from our recent trip to Italy were pinned to the refrigerator, and I had a small row of fresh herbs to tend to on the windowsill. I was making pancakes. I had perfected this recipe during the lean years when Everett was little, because a special breakfast was the only luxury I could afford to give him back then. It was ironic that now, when I could easily have a personal chef prepare anything I wanted, I chose to cook simply for the pure joy of it. "Something smells incredible," Michael said as he walked into the kitchen, his hair still damp from his morning shower. Even at 66, he carried himself with a youthful energy, though I had learned to spot the subtle signs of deep contentment that had softened his sharp edges since we've been together. Things like the way he hummed to himself while reading, or how he instinctively reached for my hand whenever we walked together. "Blueberry pancakes," I said, flipping the last one with a little extra flair just for fun. "I found some fresh berries at the farmer's market yesterday." "Is that the same farmer's market where you spent 45 minutes talking to the young organic grower about soil composition?" Michael asked with a smile, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "His techniques were genuinely interesting," I countered, leaning back against his chest. "I never had the chance to learn about gardening when I was younger. I was always working and too tired when I got home. Now I finally have the time to be curious about everything I missed." I turned around in his embrace, overwhelmed once again by how natural and right everything felt. Speaking of which, the community college called yesterday. My application for the photography course was accepted. "That's wonderful." The pride in Michael's smile always made my heart flutter. "When do you start?" "Next Tuesday, 3 days a week for 8 weeks. The instructor said we'll be using both digital and film cameras, learning about composition and lighting, and developing our own style." "You sound a little nervous." I was. At 65, this was the first time I had been back in a classroom since high school, but it was a good kind of nervous, born out of excitement rather than fear. "A little bit. It's been a long time since I was a student." "You're going to do great," Michael said with total confidence. Ever since I moved in, he had watched me master everything from his complicated espresso machine to the nuances of wine tasting. "You have an eye for beauty, Phyllis. You just need the technical skills to capture what you already see." As we sat down to breakfast, Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then looked up at me with a careful, neutral expression. "Is it Everett?" I asked. Michael nodded. "He wants to know if you're free for lunch today. He says he has something important to tell you. Ever since I moved out to California, I had been meeting my son for lunch once a month. It was still a delicate dynamic to navigate. We were both learning how to adjust to this new reality where I was no longer responsible for managing his emotions, and he no longer had a free pass to my unconditional support. But as Everett slowly proved that he was serious about changing, the lunches had become easier and more genuine. "What do you think he wants to talk about?" I asked. "I suspect it has to do with the paperwork his lawyer filed yesterday." I raised my eyebrows. Michael's business connections meant he often knew about legal proceedings before the people involved did. "What paperwork?" "Divorce papers. Everett officially filed for divorce from Indigo yesterday morning, citing irreconcilable differences, and he's requesting no spousal support." I set my coffee cup down, surprised by the sheer sense of relief I felt. In the 6 months since everything fell apart, Indigo had tried to reconcile with Everett multiple times. Every attempt was more manipulative than the last. She tried tears, threats, promises of change, and when all of that failed, she tried to use their mutual friends to pressure him into taking her back. "How do you feel about it?" Michael asked gently. "Relieved," I said honestly. As long as they were still legally together, there was always a chance she could manipulate her way back into his life. This feels like a finality. It is a finality. She can't hurt you anymore, Phyllis. She holds absolutely no power over your life or your relationship with your son. An hour later, I was sitting across from Everett at the very same diner where we had our first honest conversation 6 months ago. He looked different now, thinner but somehow healthier. His hair was cut shorter, his clothes were simpler, and there was an ease in his posture that I hadn't seen in years. "You look good," I told him, and I meant it. "I feel good. It's been a lot of change, but it's good change." He smiled, and for the first time in years, the warmth actually reached his eyes. "Mom, I need to tell you something important, and I wanted you to hear it directly from me before you heard it from anyone else." "The divorce papers." His eyebrows shot up. "You already know. Michael has his ways of finding things out. How are you feeling about it?" Everett was quiet for a moment, stirring the cream into his coffee. He had that distant, focused look on his face that he used to get as a boy when he was trying to figure out a tough problem. "Relieved," he said finally. "Terrified, but relieved. For the first time since I married her, I feel like I can make decisions based on what I believe is right, rather than what keeps the peace at home." "What changed your mind?" "The last time we talked, you were still trying to save the marriage." "The last time we talked, I was still trying to save the person I thought she could be, instead of accepting who she actually is." Everett looked up from his coffee. "She came to see me last week to talk about getting back together, but the entire conversation was about what you and Michael had taken from her. She talked about how her life was ruined because of your selfishness. Not once did she admit she did anything wrong. Not once did she take responsibility for her own choices. And that bothered you.